So, in regard to antiques, Mad Max Fury Road came out, and it was the greatest action movie that came out in its time. I mean, it's a fabulous movie, special effects wise, but story wise, I think of the four movies, story wise, it's the poorest. The acting is superb. Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy knock it out of the park. But the story. So, the premise of saying that is to take the Mad Max, Mad Max, the Road Warrior, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and you combine them into a total story. I've read criticisms of the last one as pathetic, or it wasn't like the other ones, or it was weak, or it. There are various complaints about it, but really, it's the most important of the three. And this is kind of an introduction to this, because I'm going to get really into this, because there is a technique and a science to storytelling that the Mad Max trilogy kind of is emblematic. It's an example. It's a paradigm for, the hero's journey, so to speak. And there are people who put the hero's journey uh, with superheroes, and I think it's a relatively superficial and cheap way of explaining the hero's journey, because the hero the actions of the hero requires a great sacrifice, and it's pretty tough to identify what great sacrifice Superman or Batman are going to have to give up something catastrophic, major, in order to fulfill his duties as a hero. So really, all superheroes are is just they're just rehashed retelling of ancient Greek stories about these godlike figures interplaying with the culture of humanity. They don't really they don't really seem to fulfill the true genuine nature of heroism, because of their superpowers, the lasers coming out of their eyes, and their super strength and their big huge badass muscles and all that. There's no profound sacrifice that they're making to be a hero. And that's that sacrifice that puts their heroism into context with their actions. And so, of all of cultural phenomena that would be indicative of the hero, I think superhero comic books are the least important. I mean, granted, the capes and the badges and the muscles and the powers and all this other junk, uh, they've become parodies of the concept of a hero, but I don't think they're they're very worthy of. Now there's some characters I think that are worthy of a genuine term of heroism. Ghost Rider, where he's condemned to hell. Spawn. There's a there's an enormous sacrifice that the main character in Spawn uh, gave to be what he was. If I remember when Spawn first came out. I had the first three episodes, the first three issues. I wish I still had them. That's what happens when you move like half a dozen times in like a few years. But this is just an introduction into the idea that Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is a far superior piece of art than it's given credit for, because it completes three stages of the hero. So, to briefly put it into this, so Mad Max would be the birth of the hero, which should be an indicate. it would be an indication of the sacrifice he gave, which would be the death of his child and the death of his family. And if we identify what makes a man, especially a man in society, here's Max Rockatansky. He's a cop, and he is a servant to society. That's what a police officer is. He's to serve and protect. He's to be a servant and protector of society, and that's his role. But as a man, is to be a father and a provider, in a traditional sense. So he's torn between giving himself to society or giving himself to his family. And you see that where he gives up being a cop because his friend gets killed. And then the villain provides him no choice by forcing Max Rockatansky to make the choice, because his choices to be a cop allowed him opportunities to confront people who were outside of society. And in making those choices to confront factors of evil that went against society, aka the toe cutter and the Night Rider, forced them to react. And so it was his decisions and his choices which put him in a situation where he was forced to make that sacrifice, because life does that. You have control over so many things in your life, and the other things you don't have control over. And that's the other thing too with good stories, is to be able to manage in the character. That's why I don't this thing about people having to insistently like plan out and plot out and plan out and plot out every single thing that a character does in a story. That's not life. And engaging stories is a combination between what the characters have control over and what the characters don't. And that's even more so to the point when you're talking about someone who is being heroic and portraying heroic acts in a story, is that there are certain things that he has no control over. No matter what his sacrifice is, no matter his capacity for heroism, there are certain things that he has no control over. And then there are things that he has control over. And there's that interplay between what he has control over and what he doesn't have control over that kind of identify a good story. And so I really have suspicions to people who like to plan out and plot out every single solitary aspect of a story. Stories have a natural evolution, and good stories have that capacity where the author puts conscious control into certain things and then lets other things go out and plan out and evolve. So anyway, so the sacrifice, the birth of the hero is to explain the sacrifice that he makes. And sometimes the decisions someone makes in certain positions in life allow him no other alternative but to accept the roles he's been forced into. And Max Rockatansky was forced to sacrifice his family. And I think that's the biggest thing with the ending scenes, is he's at a crossroads, because the toe cutter wasn't the actual villain. It's that the toe cutter is the outsider. The toe cutter is instinct left unchecked. It's the feral beast. It's human nature and human behavior left unchecked. And so the toe cutter isn't a villain and an evil character with pointed horns and forked tail and all other crap. He represents all the things that civilization and society have strove to control in human beings. And there's no there's no there's no resolution because Max Rockatansky didn't physically end the toe cutter. He was chasing him in hot pursuit, and you could say that Max Rockatansky contributed to it, but he didn't have a direct impact on the death of the toe cutter. The toe cutter, had Max Rockatansky not been doing what he was doing, it's likely that the toe cutter would have found himself splattered in the front end of a Mack truck anyway, because that would be the logical conclusion of a man's life like that. If he's living in that way, he's going to suffer consequences like that, and especially being on a motorcycle. So all Max Rockatansky did was help to accelerate the natural conclusion of the man's life. He didn't actually defeat evil. And what was evil? Evil is just human nature, left unchecked. So at the end of the movie, you know, what was there? He sacrificed and he sacrificed, but for what? And so I think that was the that was the conclusion of the movie. And whether or not, you know, these things were consciously placed into the movies with the idea that they were going to write the next one and write the next one as a totality, like a whole story, it's up to debate. But that's what I would conclude, is that the first movie was the birth of the hero. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of get into that, and I'll get into the other two movies specifically at a later date. But it's just to it's kind of an aggravation, really, that superheroes are given so much, and I think they kind of pollute the idea of a hero. Because, so you take it like a cop, or a guy who says, I'm going to go into the military because of free education. And society does currently consider that a hero, but granted, he's doing it voluntarily, and he's being paid. I mean, there's plenty of benefits, and there's compensation for going into the military and going and being a police officer. But the heroism is in the potential for the ultimate sacrifice. Their life. They're sacrificing other things that society holds dear for being in a position that might not happen or might happen. A cop could spend his entire career and never draw his weapon. So he has a potential for making that ultimate sacrifice, but he never really does have to. So a military personnel, they have the opportunity to take that ultimate sacrifice and take a bullet in combat, but they're likely not to do so. And it's a potential for that ultimate sacrifice. So anyway, enough of that. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.